And thanks for being here. It's such a beautiful day outside, so for those of you sacrificing that to be here, I really appreciate it. And it's a joy for me to be able to talk about what I do every day and what I think about every day, and hopefully to benefit from maybe some of the ideas and questions that you present as well. And I also want to thank Lindsay and the Arkansas Times for selecting me as one of the influential Arkansans. It was quite an honor. It certainly wasn't because I'm a power broker, so I was glad to be part of such a distinguished and interesting, diverse group. So thank you very much for that. And you know, I want to preface this talk also by saying that you know, we've had a good week at the Oxford American this week. We introduced our new editor, Roger D. Hodge, actually with a public address right here in this spot on Wednesday night. And I think that helps to emphasize that myself and the organization, we have no intention of going away from being a print magazine. We feel like that is our core responsibility, that's our core product. Everything else we do emanates and is a direct result of the print publication that we produce on a quarterly basis. I've put copies of it in front of all of you. If for some reason you don't have one, we've got plenty more, so please feel free to take it with you. But we're very proud of the magazine. I'm going to talk a bit as well about why I do feel like the magazine has a continuing role to play in its current format and why we're committed to keeping it going. But I thought I'd begin by giving you a history of the Oxford American and putting things into context so you can understand how we came to this point and what pressures have created the idea of making the Oxford American a cultural institution. This magazine is celebrating its 20th anniversary. It was founded in Oxford, Mississippi in 1992 by our former editor, Mark Smirnoff. He was working at Square Books on the Square in Oxford, and those of you who've been there know it's a sort of a legendary bookstore. A lot of great writers come through on their book tours, and of course Oxford is steeped in Southern literary history and tradition, having been the home of William Faulkner and Willie Morris and all of these wonderful writers who've come through there. And so Mark, you know, soaked that in, and obviously there were a lot of Southern writers coming through the bookstore, but many of them would complain about the fact that there was nowhere in the South to send their writing, that they would have to send their writing up to New York to get published in magazines. And you know, up in New York, they had a very particular view of what Southern literature should be, a very cliched, very stereotyped idea, and a lot of these writers wanted to break out of that. And that's where Mark got the very good idea that there was a place for a great Southern magazine devoted to publishing Southern writers and doing it in a way that was authentic and true to the South, not somebody's conjured notion of what the South could or should or might be, but how the South actually is, especially on a contemporary basis. And so he threw together that first issue by sending letters out to people, and they responded in kind. And if any of you ever saw the first issue of the Oxford American, it was quite an accomplishment. And because of the nice reception it had, it, you know, kind of continued on the life trajectory that many of us know it from and or were introduced to it by, which is this magazine that deserved to exist, that had a real purpose, but that was always challenged, you know, mostly economically. And you know, I like many of you, I came across the magazine in a bookstore in the early to mid 90s. I fell in love with it, entered my subscription. After that, never knew exactly when an issue would arrive in my mailbox. I would get letters saying, you know, we've gone out of business, but we're going to come right back as soon as we can. And many of you know John Grisham actually stepped in as publisher, mainly to sort of write the checks to keep the magazine going throughout the 1990s. And again, I mean, the magazine was wonderful editorially, but was, you know, just somewhat, I guess I can say this now having been publisher long enough, somewhat mismanaged from a business perspective. But you know, during that time, the magazine actually was quite innovative. As many of you know, to this day, our best-selling and probably most well-known issue of the magazine is our annual music issue. And this, you know, came about because, you know, Mark was putting together an issue that was going to focus on Southern music. I think halfway through the process, he thought it'd be a bad idea to write about music without people getting to actually hear the songs that were being written about. So in his mind, he put together a mixtape that took the form of a CD that went in with the magazine, and it was a revelation for people. It made the Oxford American multimedia before multimedia was a concept that existed in media, at least in magazine publishing. And so it was a big success, and it's been an annual issue for us ever since. It's won 2 National Magazine Awards for the magazine. And so with this history, it still continued to struggle. It went, I think John Grisham maybe decided he'd had enough of writing the checks, and so it was sold to a couple of guys here in Little Rock about 10 years ago, moved here. And this is irrelevant to anything other than my personal perspective, but I actually moved to Little Rock back to Arkansas from DC the same month I think the magazine came back to Little Rock. I was thrilled to death. My favorite magazine was in Arkansas, and it survived for about a year, I think, and then it went bankrupt again. And I remember a few of us got together to brainstorm ways to keep it alive, because we had heard that it may go off to Tulane, or it may go off to Emory or Vanderbilt, and I thought it'd be a shame for us to lose this wonderful magazine to another state after only having had it here in Arkansas a year. And very long story short, one of the people in our coffee clatch went to Lou Hardin at the University of Central Arkansas. He agreed to bring it to campus. I remember suggesting they turn it into a nonprofit, because Harper's Magazine had actually just gone nonprofit. It was a new concept for magazines, and the Oxford American was a nonprofit even as a for-profit corporation. So it made sense, and it had a unique mission. So that was actually how it was structured. It went over to UCA as a 501c3 nonprofit, and that's how it exists to this day. My involvement now as publisher was the result of yet another business hiccup for the magazine. Their office manager, back in, I guess it was 2007, embezzled from the magazine all year long, until by the end of the year the magazine was bankrupt and in debt to the tune of about $100,000. And I was asked to kind of step in and see if I could fix it. And so I took on the title of publisher as an unpaid volunteer, in addition to the full-time job I had at the time at UCA. And after about a year and a half, got the magazine in good enough shape where I could quit my other job and just do this, which has been a real joy, and that's where we are today. But this all gives you the context, which is that when I took over the magazine, it was bankrupt and in debt. And really, when I looked at it, the only asset that I thought we really had was our brand and our reputation, which was, unimpeachable because of the quality of the product. But magazine publishing obviously requires, more than just a reputation. And it actually, for those of you familiar, it requires quite a bit of investment. To gain new subscribers, you need to invest in things like direct mail, which is very expensive. And, there's just an awful lot of, money that needs to go into a publication before you can even think about, garnering any kind of return. And since we didn't have that, my thought and idea was, how do you take what is a great publication and make it live at a time when, certainly the economy was not in good shape in 2008 when I took over, but also print media is going through this enormous change. People's reading habits were changing, and we've seen magazines like Newsweek go bankrupt, because who wants week-old news when you have the internet? What purpose does that serve? One thing that made me optimistic about the Oxford American, and again, those of you who follow publishing pretty closely understand this, is that it's very much what's known as a niche publication. And those are the publications that probably have the best chance of surviving in our digital age. And that's because, obviously, even with newspapers, the kind of national news that we all are used to getting in all of our daily newspapers is easily found, on the internet, and you don't now need 50 people covering a White House press conference necessarily, because 2 or 3 people can do it and go out over the internet, over the wires, and you basically get the same information. But we know that with publications like the Arkansas Times and others, that local news can only be produced locally, that it's a product that's uniquely important and can't be necessarily replicated or found elsewhere on the internet. And so when it comes to magazines, it's the same way. The Oxford American, to me, there was a tremendous opportunity there because it is not only a niche, but there's an entire humongous landscape that the Oxford American rightfully can claim to have authority over, in which we have no competition. And to me, that's documenting and perpetuating the cultural and intellectual life of the South. And, you know, there are obviously other publications that people feel, you know, are our competition, publications like Southern Living and Garden and Gun, but to me, those are not competition at all. I mean, we have overlapping audiences, just like, you know, I subscribe to several different publications that I like, you know, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Harper's, Vanity Fair even. They cover, you know, different aspects maybe of similar subjects. But those publications I mentioned are lifestyle magazines. You know, they're for people who, you know, are obviously looking for food, recipes, clothing, you know, et cetera. But as far as, you know, really honoring and respecting the tradition of, you know, Southern culture, but then also playing a role and offering a forum to new voices and ensuring that Southern culture continues to be created and that it continues to be disseminated and that there's a place for those writers and those artists and those filmmakers and those, you know, artisan food makers, everybody. The Oxford American can play that role uniquely. So, you know, if we're not doing those things, we're failing because those can be ours if we want to have them. And, you know, in that respect, we can rightfully claim to be a cultural institution, taking the content that we've been producing for the print publication, but extending it into people's lives in all kinds of different organic ways. And as Lindsay mentioned, you know, we started by, you know, basically doing events, doing what is very, I think, familiar to most of you who I expect are probably sophisticated media consumers, especially because you're sitting in this room and what I'm describing is exactly what Lindsay and his team have put together, but it's a way of taking, you know, the content of the Arkansas Times and bringing it to all of you in a direct way, you know, our community, allowing you to interact with it, allowing you to, you know, take what you read in that particular issue, but now, you know, I think you wrote a few paragraphs about me. Now you're going to sit here and I'm going to bore you for about 45 minutes more. So, you know, that's kind of what we started to do with the Oxford American is, you know, take the content of our issues, whether it's a food issue or a Best of the South issue or an issue on education or an issue about New Orleans, and, you know, translate those into events where we enlist our writers and we enlist other commentators and chefs and people so that when we can create experiences for people so they can interact with the Southern culture. And you know, we've had weekends in Clarksdale, Mississippi, for instance, where people came from all over the world, literally, to Clarksdale, knowing that the Oxford American would curate an authentic experience for them, that it wouldn't be something, again, cliched, something that they could have done, you know, through a tour group or by reading, you know, a voter's guidebook. But, you know, we were going to put together a weekend where they had evenings of music, opportunities to, you know, taste the food, hear from our, you know, writers who cover the blues. And, you know, that weekend we, you know, had a beer tasting. We had all kinds of different things happen so people could come and experience the Southern culture. And these events that we've done around the South and around the country really have been really quite successful, and you know, we're the first sort of step into that realm. As Lindsay mentioned, you know, we also have, you know, really embraced our digital opportunities, knowing that we're a quarterly magazine in print. We've you know, taken the internet for all of the opportunities it presents, which is, you know, unlimited. The unlimited amount of content that we can produce, and we've not only done a lot more in the realm of writing, but we've, you know, taken advantage of multimedia. So, you know, whether it's music or whether it's the video series that we created called So Lost, which is a really unique and free window into very specific stories about people and places and really ideas around the South. You know, we've been able to do that and been recognized for it. And So Lost, the video series, led directly to a partnership we have now with NPR, called Southward, where we basically, NPR trusts the Oxford American basically to join forces and report unique stories around the South for their national audience. And the way it works is our videographer, Dave Anderson, who does the SOLAS series, will go out with the NPR reporter and report the story together. And then they'll go back to their respective homes, and Dave will produce a video and the NPR reporter will produce the radio piece. And then both pieces are released simultaneously whenever the NPR broadcast happens, on Morning Edition or All Things Considered. And then both the radio piece and the video piece live on the NPR website and the Oxford American website. But it's obviously a way for both of us to reach audiences that have mutual interests. It's a way for us to project our brand and reputation, obviously, to a wider audience, and in a way that, again, doesn't cost us as much money as if we, were to try to mail a letter to all of those people or magazine. And so these kinds of things, I think, help, again, project the Oxford American into different realms. We also started a writers' conference last year. You might have heard about it, the Oxford American Summit for Ambitious Writers. It took place at the top of Petit Jean Mountain at the Winthrop Rockefeller Institute. And again, it was a way of moving toward engaging people, not just, again, trying to capitalize on what we do well, but trying to do what we could to foster a writers' community and to, again, help the next generation of great Southern writers perfect their craft and give them an opportunity to move forward. And so that's what that summit was about, and we're excited, to kind of keep that going as an annual event. But all of this, I think, has helped direct us toward the project that Lindsay mentioned that we're going to be opening in January of 2013, which is the South on Main project in the old Juanita's building. And really, to me, after we did these events, and after we did all of this online content, and after we forged these partnerships with like-minded people, it seemed to me, why weren't we doing this on a daily basis? Why couldn't we create a physical, permanent manifestation of what I feel like we were doing well as both a magazine and, like I said, as a growing cultural institution? And so, I've been looking for real estate, really. I had this idea for the last 3 or 4 years, just looking up and down Main Street in Little Rock and North Little Rock and around town, and we never could really find the right thing that we could afford, that had enough space, et cetera. And then Juanita's one day, up and left for the River Market, and I went and looked at the building. It was perfect, and we got lucky with our landlord, and a lot of other things fell into place. But most importantly, we just recently received a grant from Art Place, a national organization that's a consortium led by the National Endowment for the Arts, but includes most of the major arts funding foundations around the country, like Ford and Kresge and others. But this grant for $290,000 will fund the renovations that we're about to begin. And the project is basically a neatly wrapped box of everything that I just have been talking your ear off about. We're going to have an Oxford American branded Southern restaurant that will be open every day for lunch and dinner, coffee in the afternoon, drinks in the evening, of course. And the idea behind the restaurant is that, it will be about, to repeat myself, honoring and respecting the traditions of Southern culinary culture, but also being a place for innovation and experimentation on the food front. And as many of you know, there's a lot of that going on in the South right now. If you go to Charleston, Atlanta, New Orleans, Birmingham, Nashville, there are all these great Southern restaurants, all these young Southern chefs, and we've got a few around town here that are already doing it. And it's exciting, and it's happening now. Also, Southern food is getting hot, in places like New York and Chicago and San Francisco, which is really not important to what we're trying to do. But we want to be a place, again, for that experimentation and that innovation. And we want the menu to be an educational experience for people who don't know a lot about Southern culinary culture beyond fried chicken and barbecue and gumbo. So the menu itself will reflect that diversity of region and of, food culture and the ingredients that went into it. And so I'm very excited about that, and we'll be partnered with the Southern Foodways Alliance and bringing in guest chefs from all of the places that I mentioned, and just making sure it's, again, a very interactive, relaxed, organic experience every day. But then every evening, we're going to have cultural programming that reflects the content and character of the Oxford American. So we'll have literary readings and musical performances and film screenings and discussions from chefs and everything that you can probably imagine, since Southern culture is so rich. And what I also want to emphasize about the programming is that we feel like at the Oxford American there's certain things that we can uniquely do for Little Rock and for Arkansas, which is use our name and reputation to bring in some well-known writers and well-known musicians and all of that. But at the same time, that's not all I want to do. I want to make sure that we're offering a platform for our local artists and writers and musicians and others who are doing this work and who deserve, credit and an opportunity to show off what they're doing. And so, we'll be not only trying to work with those individuals, but work with those institutions around the state. So, for instance, I'd like the King Biscuit Blues Festival in Helena to curate a program twice a year, 4 times a year maybe, of blues music that happens, on our stage, so that, not only are we obviously benefiting from that programming and getting to see this great music, and hopefully they're educating us about these musicians and the history, but hopefully they're getting a benefit because more people find out about this amazing festival that we have in Arkansas every year. Same way with the Ozark Foothills Film Festival in Batesville, or all of the different colleges and universities around Arkansas who are constantly not only bringing interesting people to their campuses, but the literary journals that are being produced on these campuses give those students an opportunity to have the stage for a night, to do readings from their publications and show off what they're doing. And then what's exciting to me is the platform that we're offering is not just, again, for those who are sitting in the restaurant, because everything that we do on that stage will be live streamed over our website for people to see around the world. It will be recorded for podcasts and videos. And we also, again, have these partnerships, for instance, with NPR, and NPR has already agreed that we're going to be the second location in the United States that they basically are plugged into, and they can broadcast whatever we do from that stage at any given moment. They already do that in a space called the Green Space in New York. We'll be their second space to do that with. And we're also working to develop a public television program in partnership with AETN, but that we hope will be broadcast nationally via PBS. That will be an Oxford American version of Austin City Limits, with the idea being that, a Southern sort of variety cultural program that is showcasing the writers and musicians and filmmakers, et cetera, but is filmed in front of a live audience and sent out to the rest of the world that way. And in many ways, what I hope that does for Little Rock is sort of put us on the map in the way that happened for Austin because of Austin City Limits back in the 80s, when people started to take notice of this, at the time, small southern city in Texas that had this vibrant cultural scene that nobody knew about until this show started on PBS, and that kind of triggered, I think, a lot of other things. Because, again, I think we have a culture in Arkansas to be very proud of. There's a lot going on, and if the Oxford American can play a role in that, and also bring tourism to our city and our state, enhance and elevate Arkansas's cultural and intellectual reputation, I think that would be good, because I always think of the Oxford American as one of our leading cultural exports. We're the only national magazine produced in Arkansas, and we showcase a side of the South that's often neglected or ignored because it's, we're usually condescended to, but I think that we present a smart, authentic version of the South, and that goes out to the rest of the world from Arkansas, and it proves that, yes, Virginia, there are some smart, interesting people down south, and we know that, and we don't have to apologize for what other people think about us, but, it's still important, I think, to recognize that. And so, in the end, when I, again, think about the Oxford American, we have this opportunity to be the place that people have to go in the United States to experience authentic Southern culture. We will, I think we've been that place in the pages of our magazine for 20 years. That's where people have gone to experience and learn about authentic Southern culture. It just so happens now we will literally have a building that people can go and do that as well. And in that way, again, I hope that we can claim that for Little Rock and for Arkansas. It certainly will resound to the benefit of the Oxford American, hopefully make people pay more attention to the magazine, and in that way, help to perpetuate and keep this magazine alive for many people and help them understand the significance of it to American culture. And so that is my goal. That's where we're heading, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Okay, Lindsay. Oh, sorry. You can go if you'd like. Or, okay.
Some of us who live in Soma, I think we're calling ourselves So-maniacs.
Great.
And we're absolutely thrilled.
Thank you.
This was a wonderful description of all the layers you're going to have that a lot of us weren't aware of. I was prepared to say, could we talk to you about lots of ideas we have? I think you just got about half of them. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And again, I mean, it's an idea and project that's in progress. We're very interested in ideas. And I want to also say, we're so thrilled to be in South Main Street. It's a really vibrant neighborhood that's really going places. And so if we can contribute to the ongoing revitalization and redevelopment, we're thrilled to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to ask what the future of the Oxford American's relationship with UCA is.
Sure. Well, right now, I'm not 100% certain. One thing that I've been careful about with the relationship is that, I have said this many times. I mean, the magazine owes UCA an enormous debt, and not just the money that we owe them, but for all of the problems that have existed at UCA over the last few years, and all of the things that we know didn't occur the way they were supposed to under the leadership of President Hardin and others at the university. I do think it was a bold and innovative thing for them to bring this magazine to their campus. And I know for a fact that the magazine certainly has helped enhance the university's reputation. Many people know UCA much more for the fact the Oxford American is on their campus than for their football team. And I think it's good for a university to have that kind of association. I think that, especially a public university in the center of our state, there have been many students who've had opportunities to intern at the magazine, and I know that both Lindsay and Caroline and others who've been there know that the internships at the Oxford American are really invaluable for people who are looking to make a career in publishing. And to be able to put that on your resume, to be able to get that kind of real-world experience, because the interns do real work there. It's something that people would claw and fight for and do if it were available in New York City. But even in New York City, there's not a major national magazine with an internship program that exists on a college campus. And we have that here at UCA, at a public university. And so I think the association's been good for us, obviously. It's been good for them. But, because of all of the scrutiny they're under and the problems that they've had, I've told President Courtway, we're going to be okay either way. I mean, the magazine is now, thank goodness, in a place where, we can survive, I think, regardless of whether we have our editorial offices on campus. And, if they would like to keep us there, we'd be more than happy to be there. I think we have a lot to contribute. If they decide that it's, difficult to justify to all of their constituencies, I totally understand that. I mean, I'm in politics now, and it's a difficult thing sometimes to make people understand the value of certain organizations or associations. So that's a long-winded way of saying I don't know, but we're going to be all right either way, and we'll be very grateful to UCA in perpetuity for what they did to keep the magazine alive. Sure, Chris.
Do you have long-term, do you have an idea in the long term that you will bring your editors and your interns to the center because then people come here and then they're like, but the editors are coming?
Well, the truth is I don't have a plan for that because I don't feel like I'm in full control of those particulars. The question, if you didn't hear it, was, is my long-term plan to bring all of the editors and everything to our location on Main Street? And there's certainly an intuitive benefit to doing that, but I'm not just going to make a decision or set a goal toward that because I don't want to offend UCA and I don't want to in any way go back on any kind of deal we have with them. But, you know, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if over time that's what happens, but it's not a goal because, like I said, I don't feel like I have full power to do that. Sure, Frank.
Let me get a mic.
All right, well, with regard to the So Lost video series, I mean, you've been involved producing some of those, I believe. Some of the videos have received a lot of attention, won some awards, and they're certainly a dynamic part of your magazine's web content. So I'd be interested in hearing more about your plans for continuing that, expanding that project, and how that relates to the online aspect of the magazine as well.
Sure. And I don't know if you heard the question, but, you know, it's about the So Lost video series that we have. And I guess what I'll say on that, you know, that series was conceived, you know, over a cup of coffee with Dave Anderson, with the idea being that, you know, we thought there was a place for, again, some kind of video series that reflected the Oxford American's unique sensibility as far as finding stories in the South. And we thought that maybe one of the best ways to do that would just be to send Dave out with a camera and see what he comes across, you know, riding literally the back roads of the South. And that's why we called it So Lost, because the idea was, you know, you got lost and this is what you found and these are the stories presented, again, in an authentic way. Another reason why we did it that way is that making video is really expensive, and we were doing this very much on the cheap. I mean, as cheap as we could do it. And that's the remarkable thing about it, is it's really a testament to the talent of Dave Anderson that the video series turned out the way it did. His very first episode was perfect. It was exactly what we had hoped it would be. He basically went up to Mountain View, Arkansas, and hung out on the square, you know, on one of their Friday night bluegrass picking sessions. And again, we all know about that, I think, in this room, but a lot of people around the South don't know the history of bluegrass and Mountain View and this amazing sort of scene that develops on the weekends when everyone just kind of literally comes down from the hills and just picks together, and the traditions. And, you know, his video even captured the next generation, these young girls who, you know, were just super talented. And it was just, it was a informative video. It was an artistic video. It was heartwarming. There was everything about it was perfect. And the series kind of just continued from there in a very organic way. Literally the first year, I mean, it hadn't even been a year that we'd been doing the series, we were a finalist for a National Magazine Award in the video category. You know, they pick 5 finalists every year and 1 winner. And yet we're up against, you know, I think, ESPN, the magazine, and all of these really rich magazines that probably dumped hundreds of thousands of dollars into their videos. And here we were, you know, I was scrounging whatever I could to pay Dave, you know, literally his Sonic, you know, hamburgers when he went out on the road. I mean, that was how it happened. So we're a finalist the first year. The next year we're a finalist again, and we win. You know, we're up in New York. We're sitting at the table with the New York Times Magazine folks, you know, and they were finalists in a category too, and we won, and they didn't. When I came back to the table with the award, I don't think they looked very happy at all. But it was fantastic. And again, I think that the idea was to take, you know, everything about the magazine that was great and then just literally translate it into a different media format. Because, you know, our magazine is scrappy. We hardly ever pay our writers probably what they deserve. And, you know, but what they do produce is excellent work. And it doesn't go in our magazine if it's not excellent. Same way with these videos. And so the plan for the series, to answer your question, is, you know, obviously to continue it, to expand it. I've, you know, introduced Dave already to our new editor with the idea of asking our new editor to use Dave to maybe supplement some of the writing in the magazine. And we've done that on occasion. We had an investigative piece a few months ago by Malcolm Garcia about some of the veterans from the Gulf War. And we sent Dave out with Malcolm to do a video that supplemented the story in the magazine. And I think if we can continue to do things like that accentuate and complement our coverage on our website, I think that would be terrific, while also, you know, trying to be creative about new projects. Dave has another idea about, you know, ways of doing videos around pieces of literature, you know, more artistic expressions, maybe reading poetry or a short story and then setting it to video. And I know he's got a particular word for it, and I'm embarrassing myself, I can't remember it. But stay on the lookout for that. I mean, we're really hopeful that we can continue to innovate on the internet that way. Sure.
You mentioned that the Oxford American doesn't really have any competition, that you guys are really the ones who are pointing to how enriched Southern culture is. And I'm just like wondering why. I mean, why has no one else seen the opportunity or like tapped into what I think has always been thought of as a rich culture?
Mm-hmm.
Why is Oxford American, unique?
Well, I mean, there's a simple answer and a more complicated one. The simple answer is because not a lot of money in it. I mean, this publishing is a business, and I've already gone through all of the trials and tribulations we've had. It's easier to produce a Garden Gun than it is to produce an Oxford American, because it's easier to, and I mean no offense by this whatsoever, but to sell your editorial content to your advertisers, which is literally what they do, and we refuse to do that. So if we have a particular reputation we're trying to uphold. I will say that there are a combination of journals and magazines that probably do a little bit of what we do, and especially the academic journals, the Virginia Quarterly Reviews out of UVA, Southern Review out of LSU, Georgia Review, Sewanee, of course. But they're academic, and they are not geared towards a broad audience. And again, the amazing thing that the Oxford American does is, we are a mass-produced consumer magazine that's really kind of trying to be the Southern New Yorker, in that, we're trying to bring a high standard of intellectual and cultural coverage to as broad an audience as possible. And we're, distributed in all 50 states in Canada and internationally. You can walk into any bookstore and find us. But certainly the economics of it are difficult, which is why I've been having to kind of, do somersaults and, crazy things to kind of keep us alive. And I think that's the reason. I think the reason is there just aren't a lot of people who are willing to kind of, tighten their belt, roll up their sleeves, and produce an excellent literary magazine that can appeal to a broad group of people. And so we're willing to do the hard stuff. And I'm thrilled to death that the landscape is so open, because it allows us to move in so many different places. Sure.
Let me get a mic to you so they can hear you in the back.
You mentioned you have recently hired a new editor. I was remiss not to mention that in the introduction, but can you talk about how you managed to land Roger Hodge? And I'm sure some of us were here to hear him talk earlier this week, but what you envision him doing differently with the magazine.
Okay. Well, the funny thing about that question is, Roger was asked that question, and I hesitate to answer for him for the reason I'll give you. But so there was really no mysterious process to getting Roger, in the sense that, after we managed to, survive the ordeal that we kind of went through for a few weeks, dealing with the action and aftermath of dismissing our editor and managing editor, obviously the time had come to think about a replacement. And to me, the list was necessarily very short of people who could fill that role, because I felt like, with the reputation of the Oxford American, we needed an editor who had significant national magazine editing experience, not only because the job itself requires it, but because we were replacing the founder of the magazine, and really the person that we picked had to have unimpeachable credentials. And so to me, that was very important and necessary. But beyond just being the editor of a national magazine, we had to have somebody who had impeccable literary credentials and the respect of writers and people involved in that community. Because, again, the Oxford American is a very particular type of magazine that writers hold very dear, with respect, I think. And there just aren't a lot of magazines that do what we do at the level we do. Harper's Magazine, where Roger Hodge comes from, having edited it for 4 years, is one of the few publications that I think is comparable in that way. And Roger certainly does have the respect of writers, and I mean the people that he's worked with. And I did my due diligence. I mean, all of the editors and writers, they just unanimously, approve of Roger Hodge. That think, he just was such a careful editor, such a thoughtful editor, someone they enjoyed working with, and so that was important. And then finally, because we do what we do, it was important to me that we had somebody with at least some Southern bona fides. And when you start, that narrowing that list the way we've done, I mean, you get to a very, very small group of people who have that. And Roger is a native of Del Rio, Texas, educated at the University of the South in Sewanee. He had that. So you can imagine, he was on my short list. And the simple answer to your question, I emailed him. We talked on the phone several times, really hit it off. I really had a lot of respect for his ability and vision and thoughtfulness. And then he came down to Little Rock, and it was even better, knowing him in person. And I knew that this was the guy, and I think he knew that we were the magazine. I mean, he said there are very few publications I would even consider editing after having edited Harper's, but the Oxford American is certainly one. And I think the opportunity was as interesting to him as he was to us. And then finally, as far as what he would do differently, I want to say this. One thing that I've been very adamant about as publisher, I mean, I have never interfered with the editorial content of the Oxford American as publisher. I've never told somebody to put something in there or to take something out. I think that's pretty actually evident if you read the publication over the last 5 years, because it's certainly, we certainly haven't advantaged ourselves from a business perspective sometimes with the content that has been published in the magazine. I come from the editorial side of publishing. I never was on the business side of publishing until I took this role on, and so that's my perspective. So the editors of the Oxford American have full independence and autonomy. I mean, under the previous editor, I never even saw the magazine before it went to the printer, for better or worse. You may call that irresponsible. I thought it was, something that was necessary to prove how significant I thought it was to give that kind of independence to the editor. So Roger's going to do whatever he's going to do. And I think that changes will probably happen organically over time, and even he doesn't know what they are yet. Any editor is going to imprint a publication with his or her own particular approach. And he did mention there'd be a little bit more nonfiction and reporting journalism, which I think is excellent. And again, we'll kind of wait and see what happens. But whatever evolution happens, I think it'll be a slow and measured evolution. I don't think you're going to get the next issue of the magazine and it's going to be completely redesigned and rethought through. I think he knows that these readers of our magazine are serious and careful and very strong in their opinions, and they will not tolerate any kind of diminishment of the standards and the kind of content we've been publishing. And so he gets that, and I think that if anything, more of those writers will be back in the fold, and more of that kind of writing will be back in the magazine because Roger's in charge. He said we have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
I'm really interested in the food culture side of the new building, and I'd like you just to amplify that a little bit. And who do you have in mind, and can you reveal her name? Person.
Well, we do have a chef that we've already started working with, and I can't reveal his or her name right now because of, just respecting that person's, current employment and all of that kind of stuff. But suffice to say, it's very exciting. I think the way we want the restaurant to be, we want it to be, and I hope, a niche that doesn't quite exist here in Little Rock, although we are getting, great restaurants opening all the time here. And I think, the food culture of Little Rock is something for all of us to be proud of. And I think, all of the chefs and restaurateurs that I know are just, thrilled at the mutual benefit that occurs when so much stuff is happening at the same time. But again, we want the menu to reflect the true breadth of Southern culinary culture. We want it to be accessible to people, so it's not going to be expensive. We want the ingredients to be local and to be, again, ingredients that reflect, you know, the traditions of the South. So you're going to have a place that's, you know, casual, but smart and fun and tasty, let's hope. And, you know, it's going to be, I think, really a nice addition to our scene here in Little Rock. Thank you.